Hello and welcome back to the Welsh Premiership podcast. Today we're going to be previewing the return of the Welsh Prem for the first time in 18 months, which we're all very excited about. And it'll be the Welsh Prem Cup for us this weekend. For those of you that don't know, the Welsh Prem Cup is a new competition that runs up until Christmas, with the Welsh Premiership teams being split into two pools, East and West, both comprising of 6 teams. So in the East pool, there's Cardiff, RGC, Merthyr, Ebbw, Newport and Ponty. And then in the west section of the group, there's Aberavon, Quins, Llandovery, Bridgend, Swansea and Llanelli. So moving on then to the start of the competition this weekend. All games kick off at 2:30 this Saturday. The first game is Cardiff v RGC. So boys, what do we think of that game and what are your predictions for the game?
Well, obviously, the last full season, Cardiff are, the best team in the league. So, they made some good signings. So I think, they've got to be one of the favourites for the Cup and the Premiership. So, I'd fancy Cardiff to beat RGC by, well, not quite comfortably, but I think there'll be, a few scores between them.
Yeah, I think Cardiff obviously finished the last season we had strongly. They've lost a lot of players, but they have brought in some new signings, and obviously they've got the Cardiff rugby youngsters coming up as well. I like the look of William Bradley. I've seen him play a few times. They do look strong. I'd back Cardiff win this weekend.
Yeah, obviously, you spoke about some of the new signings. They've brought in a new face at 10, Jack Maynard, who's got some big responsibilities on him, replacing Gareth Thompson, who did a great job for them last season. And then they've brought in like Dav Smith as well in the back, so Wales Sevens flyer. And they've also kept Morgan Allen and Tom Haberfield, who's experienced ex-regional players. Adam, how important do you think keeping Morgan Allen and Tom Haberfield in the core of that squad will be?
Yeah, players like that will be huge for them, and they've got players like Dan Fish who will drop down from the Cardiff rugby team to play most weekends. Players like that, they've probably got over 150 regional appearances between the three of them. That makes such a big difference to them, and I can see them having a really good season.
Yeah, and obviously we know that RGC, although they might not have the star names and the financial backing that Cardiff might have, they're always a strong, tough team to play against. Recently appointed Kerry Jones as well as the head coach. Obviously, unfortunately, he probably hasn't had enough time yet to put his stamp on that team at RGC, but he held down the role of the Dragons quite well as well when he was there. So hopefully that RGC will remain a strong team in that conference as well. Moving on then to Merthyr v Ebbw. Obviously, Merthyr did quite well, maybe not as well as they have done in the previous few years before COVID. But Ebbw really struggled before COVID. Adam, what do you make of Ebbw and the players that they've brought in?
Yeah, they've made some really good signings, in fairness. I think it was inevitable that they were going to improve. Like, they had to improve, really. They were in 11th place when the Premiership was curtailed back in March of last year. So, a club of that size, they were always going to make improvements, and they have. They made some really good signings. You look at, David Howells, Welsh international, like he's not old yet, he's still quite young. So, he'll make such a big difference to them, and I can see them really improving this year.
And Tobias, what do you make of Merthyr? Obviously, they've gone through a bit of transition as well, bringing in a few new boys as well. And what do you think? How do you think they'll get on?
Yeah, well, we all know Merthyr do have a good financial backing, and they've brought some strong signings in this year. But I think when we spoke to the Chief the other month, he said that they weren't happy with how they performed last season. I think now, with the backing they have, they've got to perform this year. I seen them play the other week when they played Bridgend in the friendly. They looked strong. I think Gareth Thompson coming in outside half is really going to help them there. I know they've lost Matthew Jarvis, obviously a fullback, but they have got some good signings in, and I think they'll be pushing this year, and rightly so.
So, Adam, with that in mind, then, what would your prediction be for that game at the Word?
I think it'll be a really tight game, in fairness, but I think Merthyr will just edge it. I think they'll have a little bit too much for Ebbw Vale, but like I said, I think Ebbw Vale will really improve this year.
And Tobias?
Yeah, again, I'm quite similar with that there. I think close game. I think maybe the home backing might just edge it for Merthyr, and obviously both sides want to start strong. But yeah, I think I'll back Merthyr.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I spent a bit of time up at Ebervale talking to Greg, and I think there's a massive focus on that first game because if Ebu can really lay down a marker and win that first game away at Merthyr, then they really are setting themselves up for a good season. I think they've had a really tough pre-season, traveling to the likes of London Scottish, Aberavon, and Cardiff Met at home as well. They've had some tough games, blooded quite a few new youngsters as well. They got quite a few young dragons with them. So I think Ebu really do have a good chance. But moving on then to the last game in the East Conference, Pontypridd will play host to Newport at Sardis Road. Just before COVID, Newport actually had a surprise win at Pontypridd, but they did play each other in pre-season as well. And I think Pontypridd came away with a victory then. So Tobias, with that in mind, what do you think your predictions for that game will be?
I think this weekend, again, Ponty Newport, I think it'll be a close game. I seen Newport play last week, impressed me, especially defensively. Obviously, Ponty got a good pack. I don't know how they're going to cope, obviously, with the loss of Davlocki in the centre. But yet again, they're strong side. I'd back Ponty to be up there challenging this year. I'd probably say Ponty will edge you by one score this weekend.
And Adam, then, what do you think?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what Tobias has said there. I think it'd be a competitive game. You know, both teams, will really think they can do something this year. Obviously, Davlocki has left Ponty, but they've made some good signings. Such a historic club. I think it'd be a close game, but I think Ponty will probably just edge it. Yeah.
But have made some massive signings all across the team, really. Some good signings up front and in the back line as well. Matt O'Brien's taken over the captaincy from Rhys Jenkins, even though Rhys Jenkins is still with the squad. I think Ponty are going through a little bit of transition as well. They got quite a lot of boys there, to be fair, that have a lot to prove, though. I know there's a few boys that have been released by the Blues, the Ospreys, and the Dragons that'll be with Ponty. They have a lot to prove. Moving on to the Western Conference then, and the first game, Aberavon v Llanelli at the Talbot Athletic Ground. Adam, what would your predictions be for that game?
Yeah, I think Aberavon will win this one, probably quite comfortably as well, to be honest. Teams like Llanelli and Swansea, they rely a lot on the Scarlets and the Ospreys youngsters coming down. And it seems to have been quite a disjointed pre-season for Llanelli. Obviously, they had a good win against Trim Saran, but, Aberavon is going to be such a big step up from there. And you look at some of the players Aberavon have signed, Joe Thomas, Jay Baker, players with regional experience. I think Aberavon will win quite comfortably, to be honest.
And Tobias, what are your thoughts on that game?
I'm going to have to agree with Ada. I think Aberavon, very strong again. They finished the end of last season we had well. Llanelli, the problem with them, I don't know how match fit they're going to be. They've only had the one pre-season friendly. Obviously, I know there'll be a few boys coming down from the Scarlets who think they will be match ready. I think maybe the pre-season Aberavon have had will help them, and I think they'll secure a pretty comfortable victory.
Yeah, obviously Aberavon did really well in the season before COVID as well, led by Jason Hyatt. Still got a good core of the players there that were with them before COVID. You look at the likes of like Steph Andrews, Alan Thomas, Joe Tomlin Reeves in the pack. They got that real quality, and then the players they've brought in as well. Joe Thomas has obviously been with Leicester, the Dragons, even though he didn't play for them, and then he's gone and had a really good experience in the MLR. Too difficult to tell where Llanelli will be this season. We'll see them not playing much pre-season at all. So I think to judge Llanelli truly, we'll have to see how they'll be faring into these games. You never know. They might just use the Premiership Cup as to sort of get that match fitness then building up until the actual Premiership season in December. And then moving on to the second game in the Western Division, you got Bridgend Ravens up against Quins. Spike, I know you spent a lot of time with Bridgend Ravens. What do you make of them and their chances for the season, and what do you make of their chances for that game?
I think they've got to be seen as contenders this year. because the players they brought in, they've been busy, active, bringing new faces in. Pre-season, I think they were still gelling, trying different combinations, bringing players in. The likes of Joe Gatt coming back from Cardiff, Ed Howley, Kieran Martin, Zach O'Driscoll. There's some really strong signings there. I think Quins, again, a very strong side. Their squad, it looks good all over. I think it'll be a close game Saturday. As much as I'd love to say Bridgend win, I think Quins will be strong. I think Quins might edge it by a couple of points.
And Ad, what are your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, well, I think Bridgend will improve this season. Like last season they were quite unlucky. They lost quite a few games right at the end. If they'd have held on, the league table would have looked completely different. So there's a good team in there somewhere, and I think we'll see that this year. Do I think they'll win on Saturday? I think Quins will be a little bit too strong for them, but this season we'll really see a different Bridgend, I think.
Yeah, I think Bridgend, similar to Ebbw Vale, they have a really good opportunity to go out on Saturday, and if they can overturn that Carmarthen Quins team, obviously they've had some big signings themselves with the likes of like Rhys Lawrence, Nick Cudd coming in. If Bridgend can win that game, which they have a really good chance of doing, they set down a good marker then for the rest of the season and show the rest of the teams that they can compete. So I think they got a really good chance there. But I do agree that Carmarthen Quins, again, had a really good season before COVID. We know they like to play, they like to chuck the ball about, play expansive rugby with their backs. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But I do think Carmarthen Quins will be a little bit too strong. And then last of all, Llandovery will host Swansea. Ad, I know you went to see Swansea the other day in a friendly against Neath. How did they get on in that? And what do you think the game against Llandovery will be like?
Yeah, I was there. It was a weird one, really. It's the first preseason game they've played. First time they've played since March 2020. So obviously, you can't expect them to be fully match fit. But, they started well. Pack played really well. 17-0 up with about 10, 15 minutes left. But fair play to Neath. They came back 17-14 full time. And you've got to think that if there was 5-10 minutes left, Neath would have won that, which just goes to show how probably Swansea aren't match fit yet. And that'll probably come. I won't be too surprised if Swansea use the Premiership Cup as a sort of build up to the Premiership starting in December. And it obviously remains to be seen if Swansea have any Ospreys youngsters coming down, which will obviously make a big difference. Like Swansea and Llanelli, two smallest budgets in the league, obviously rely a lot on their regions. But Saturday's game, I think Llandovery away will be too much for them. It won't be they won't lose heavily, but I think Llandovery will win that.
Yeah, like I know Max Nagy had a couple of few games for Swansea at the tail end of the season before COVID, didn't he? And I think it looks like he's going to be involved a little bit with the Ospreys this year as well. So it does look like I'm sure they'll get the next crop through of youngsters with the Ospreys, but it remains to be seen how they'll adapt to life in the Premiership and senior rugby.
Yeah, and you look at some of the players they've had playing for them the last 2-3 years, off the top of my head, Morgan Morris, Will Griffiths, Max Nagy, players like that, all quality players. Like, will the next batch be as good as that? It takes some doing for them to be that good. But no, I'm sure the Ospreys youngsters will make a difference when they drop down.
And Spike, obviously, Llandovery have lost a few of their big players. Obviously, Jack Maynard, Cleo Green, both gone to Cardiff. How do you think they'll get on for the season, and what do you think their chances in that game against Swansea will be?
I still think Llandovery, I know they've lost a few players, and they have brought a couple of new faces in as well, but I still think they're a really strong side. I think they'll be too strong for Swansea this weekend, being totally honest. Again, we've said Swansea in the same boat as Llanelli. We don't know how match fit they are. We don't know what youngsters they've got coming down to play. Then yet again, Llandovery will have a couple of Scars youngsters there, helping them out this year. And I know they've been impressed with a few they've had in recent years, as we've been told by a few people. But yeah, Llandovery, I like the look of them. They play good rugby again. They play exciting rugby. I'd back Llandovery to win comfortably, I think.
Moving on then to look at the Prem Cup season as a whole. Tobias, what would your predictions be for the East Conference, and who do you think is going to be competing to get those two spots for the playoffs?
Personally, I think my top two teams will be Pontypridd and Cardiff. I think if you look at this league of 6 year, you could put case in for any of these teams to be up there in our top two spot. I think every team's so strong, but the way Cardiff played a couple of years ago, the squad Ponty have, I think they'll be too strong. But again, I've been impressed by Merthyr and Newport, especially in pre-season. So yeah, I think it could be wide open.
Anad, what are your thoughts on the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough one, to be honest. I think Cardiff will finish first, but I think anyone's playing for second then. It just all depends on who builds up a bit of momentum, gets a few wins early on. But I think Ponty will finish second. It'll be Cardiff and Ponty going through to the semi-finals.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to tell, obviously, with it they're being so long away from the league, like league rugby, with COVID, obviously, so much change in the teams that it really is difficult to tell. It would be hard to look past Cardiff winning the pool and potentially winning the Prem Cup as well. But we just don't know, really, do we? There's been so much change. Obviously, Cardiff lost quite a few players to the likes of Bridgend, Merthyr, but then they've also recruited well as well. So I've gone for Merthyr as my second choice team, actually. I think they've brought in some good players. Obviously, with Chief at the helm there, they always seem to do a good job. Didn't have the best of season. They were a little bit disappointed, as Tobias mentioned earlier, with the season before COVID. But then if you look back on the last 5 years prior to that, they were always up there competing for the title. So I'd have to back Merthyr to sort of bounce back and be one of those top two teams. Although, as you said, it could be anyone. Newport and Ebervale have recruited so well as well. And RGC are always difficult team to beat, as a Ponty. So I wouldn't be surprised to see any of those teams in the top two. And as we know, we're not famous for our accurate predictions on this podcast. So looking into the Western Conference, then obviously Aberavon, Quins, Llandovery, Swansea, Llanelli, and Bridgend. Tobias, what are your predictions for that pool?
I think for me, he's an obvious choice top league. I'm going to have to say Aberavon. I love the way they play. I think squad they got again, the signings they brought in, I think they will sit top of that conference. I think second place, I'd say he's going to be close. I'm probably going to back Carmarthen Quins, but then I wouldn't rule out Bridgend or Llandovery clinching that spot either.
And Ad, what are your thoughts on the Western Conference?
Yeah, I agree with Tobias. I think it'll be Aberavon and Quins in the top two. I don't think Llandovery will be too far away, mind. I think it'll be those three really going for the two spots. But it'll be Quins and Aberavon who get the top two and move on to the semi-finals.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you both there and say Aberavon and Quins as well. It is worth to note as well, Bridgend obviously have gone for quite a big squad this season, which might obviously help them when the team start to pick up a few injuries and start missing out players. I think that could help Bridgend. Obviously, Aberavon, Quins, traditionally quite big squads anyway, and they've obviously got that quality as well. But then obviously we're looking at a shortened Premiership and a short Prem Cup as well. So you might not have that massive impact of missing players that you would in a regular 8-month season. So yeah, I'd have to go Aberavon and Quins as well. All right, that's a wrap for this preview episode then. Obviously, we're all very much looking forward to the return of competitive rugby in Wales and the Prem Cup this weekend. There'll be a slight change to our schedule of podcasts now. Instead of the guest episodes coming out on every other Friday, they'll now be out every other Wednesday, starting from next Wednesday. And then weekly podcasts on Friday, looking back at the action of the weekend before, and obviously looking forward to the games on that coming weekend. For anybody that's interested, we're looking for contributors to a website and social media. We're trying to get as many people as we can up to games, trying to get people to as many games as we can all over the country. so we can provide as much coverage as we can, so we can get updates on our social media. So follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Welsh Prem Pod, where you'll find social media updates, match reports, and interviews and podcasts with guests from the Premiership as well. So thank you for listening, and see you again on Wednesday.